Hi everyone, welcome to Adventures in Theater History, where we bring you the best stories from the deep and fascinating history of theater in the city of Philadelphia. And as the trumpet section from our house orchestra here at the Tower of Theater History reminds me, today is March 23rd, 2026, which is the 5th birthday of the podcast. Thank you. I'm very grateful. We have released over 100 new episodes of the podcast over the past 5 years, and I'm very proud to have come this far along with all of you, and I promise there's more to come. I'm more than a little busy this spring with other projects, such as, being on stage 8 times a week in actual plays, which is keeping me from my usual research and recording activities. But don't worry, I haven't forgotten you folks, so I'm bringing out some gems from the vault of our Patreon feed. Patreon is where, in return for their generosity, every month supporters of this show are treated to bonus episodes, special features, benefits of all sorts. I hope you will also consider joining these nice folks. You can find us at patreon.com/AITH podcast. So, I'm still doing research when and where I can. In fact, in my dressing room backstage at the Walnut Street Theater, I've been reading the memoirs of the famous burlesque artist Gypsy Rose Lee as I prepare to create an upcoming episode on Patreon about the world premiere of the show Gypsy, which was based on that memoir. It's a fantastic read, and it reminded me that a short stroll from where I'm sitting on 9th and Walnut, over on the corner of 10th and Arch Street, was the Trocadero Theater, Philadelphia's own famous burlesque venue. And it has been almost 50 years since that era of Philly theater history ended. So, today, for your listening pleasure, a lament for the Troc. March 31st in 1978 was a sad occasion. It was the last show at the Trocadero Theater. That is to say, the last show of the old strip club joint that is now known as the Troc, a concert venue which may be coming back to life soon, I hope. Formerly, of course, it was the Arch Street Opera House. We've been through the history of that theater from the 19th century many times. But in the living memory of many Philadelphians, it was a burlesque house where shows of a certain nature took place. And, of course, its closing brought a great deal of notice from the local press. And I happen to have here in my files an article from one of the greatest feature writers from that era of Philadelphia journalism, Edgar Williams, from the Enquirer magazine of March 1978. Okay, here we go. A lament for the late, once great Troc by Edgar Williams. The headline in the paper had read, "Troc's closing to sound burlesque death knell here." But it was an outrageous lie. The Eyewash Trust ought to have been able to bring suit against the perpetrator of that head as an unlicensed competitor under Fair Practices Act. It is true that as this tone poem begins, the Troc Theater, once the grande dame of Arch Street, has less than a fortnight to live. But when it expires, it will not mean the death of burlesque, for burlesque is long dead, its obsequies long over. The fact of the matter is that the Troc has been functioning under false pretenses for these many years, like a zombie walking the earth aimlessly, without a heart or soul. The schlocky, distorted presentations it has offered over the last 20 years or so, cheap porn movies that must have been photographed through gauze and a passel of real live girls who show everything except the slightest suggestion of style, have been no more burlesque than Philadelphia graffiti is art. This, then, is a lament for burlesque. It is a lament for the Troc that was and hasn't been for years. and cannot ever be again. And it is a lament for, to borrow Joseph Conrad's line, only a moment of youth, the time to remember, the time for a sigh, and goodbye. It is a fond recollection of the candy butchers, who made intermissions as much fun as the show with their spiels that offered a box of genuine imported chocolate bonbons for the unbelievable price of $0.25, with a rare set of French postcards that I cannot describe to yous on account of their absolutely daring nature. It is a loving recall of the comics, Top Bananas and Lower Hands, with their seemingly countless routines. It is a look back at the striptease dancers, whether headliners or secondary attractions, who could stir up more excitement by removing a glove one finger at a time than the ersatz stripper of today can achieve through total nudity. And I confess, this is a poignant personal lament for a second-string stripper, a crisp, crunchy package of goodness, round, firm, and fully packed, who called herself Mickey Dennis. She was blonde and exceeding fair, and one night at the Troc in 1937, I fell madly in love with her. As the band in the pit, 5 pieces, plus a conductor who doubled with the fiddle, played, if memory serves, My Man, Mickey Dennis emerged through a slit in the curtain and began her dance. She wore a white gown, long gloves, and silver pumps, and she glided gracefully across the stage several times before beginning to remove one glove. To me, a college student who considered himself worldly, but in verity was still a long way from achieving aridity behind the ears, Mickey Dennis was a vision of loveliness. And by the time she had finished her act, stripping down to a G-string, net panties, net bra, and pasties, I was a goner. The headliner was Diana Logan, who had been getting a lot of ink, as we say in the trade, as a highly promising stripper. Not until 4 years later did H.L. Mencken invent the word ecdysiast, adapted from a Greek word used to describe the shedding of an outer coat or integument of a snake or crustacean. But I didn't hang around to catch her act. I went back to the Troc stage door in an alley off 10th Street, determined to talk my way in to meet Mickey Dennis and tell her I had come to take her away from all this. But as I approached the door, the chicken in me went cluck, cluck. I crept away, ashamed of my lack of courage. But next morning, dreams of Mickey Dennis dancing in my head while a philosophy professor at Westchester State College droned on. I conceived a brilliant plan. A big formal dance was coming up on campus in a month or so, and I would invite Mickey Dennis. I could picture the two of us making an entrance while my campus contemporaries marveled at my urbanity in conquering a beautiful woman. Rushing back to the dormitory, I wrote Mickey Dennis a letter of invitation. I mailed it and waited. Mickey Dennis, wherever you may be, why didn't you answer my letter? I had first gone to the Troc when I was a pimply-faced high school kid in 1931, and I continued going through my college years and right on until the United States Army requested my services during World War II. I believe I was privileged to be a participant, albeit a paying one, $1.25 for a box seat, $1 in the orchestra and first gallery, 75 cents in the second gallery in the golden era of that theater. I wouldn't have missed it for anything because, you see, it was great fun. Good, clean, dirty fun. For a young man just beginning to feel the wind of the world in his face, it was a wonderfully naughty way of being an adventurer, of glimpsing forbidden sights of the still mysterious grown-up world, by marveling at the prepossessing proportions of partly clad girls and laughing heartily at the comic routines, most of which had a double entendre that now, it can be admitted, often went misunderstood at the time. When I was a Junker, trotting to the Troc, and for a few years also to the now-gone Bijou and Gaiety, near Franklin Square, where 8th Street, Race Street, and Ridge Avenue run together, there was a popular gag about a teenager whose father warned him against going to burlesque shows because he would be sure to see things he wasn't supposed to see. And my father was right, went the punchline. One night, I went to a burlesque show, and guess what I saw? My father. I never saw my father at the Troc, but I saw so many well-known civic figures from time to time as to make me wonder why the Troc and the other burlesque houses were raided periodically. And now, reflecting on the relatively innocent things said and done on the Troc stage, I can't help but wonder whether the so-called guardians of the public morals weren't in on a strategy to hype interest in burlesque. Let, say, Georgia Southern, one of the all-time great strippers, be hauled in on charges of public lewdness, which happened at least 5 times over a period of 20 years at the Troc, and the next time she appeared, the place would be jammed so tightly that the balcony rivets groaned. Nobody ever seemed to fret much about the raids. It became almost traditional that during show hours, matinee and evening, Monday through Saturday and midnight Sunday, motormen of trolley cars moving along Arch Street would clang their bells as they passed the Troc, whereupon the comics on stage would ad-lib, "Here come the cops! Let's get out of here!" A raid meant a journalistic field day in the city, and editors saw to it that such stories were assigned to reporters who not only had a facility for letting down their hair at the typewriter, but could remove their toupees and fling them at the readers. In 1931, a raid on the Troc inspired an Inquirer reporter, whose name is lost to posterity, to write what may have been the quintessential story. Philadelphia, June 17th. The Trocadero Theater, tinslated home of burlesque at its burlesquest, will close its doors Saturday night, all because of a Bible student and some fig leaves. But there he was, in the first row, day after day, night after night, to catch a glimpse of the blondest of the chorus girls. After quite a few days of this, the infatuated boy's teacher became concerned over his absence. After inquiries here and there, he discovered his pupil was doing his homework in the Troc. So off went teacher to the Troc, too, to see what would have appeal to draw one away from Exodus and Genesis. He saw. Yes, he saw. He saw girls clad in chiffon scanties, with the scanties becoming scantier and scantier. He saw the few fig leaves become more of a figment and gradually leaving. He then entered a formal complaint. The Board of Theater Control, Thomas M. Love, chairman, Dr. Frederick Poole, Mrs. J. Willis Martin, and J. Howard Reber were called into consultation. It was decided the members of the board should see the show. When they saw the girls walking around the stage with rosebuds nicely painted on their bodies, there was nothing else to it but curtains for the Troc. A voluminous report that made copious notes of the rosebuds, fig leaves, bits of chiffon, and falling shoulder straps was turned over to Mayor Mackey with the recommendation that the theater license be revoked. The mayor studied the report with even more thoroughness than he would the monthly report of the Broad Street Subway Conference, and probably the rosebud motif got to him. He finally agreed that the Troc must be made safe for the city's youth by closing it Saturday. But don't rush. The objectionable features of the show have been removed for the next few performances. To make certain of this, members of the Vice Squad raided the Troc last night and took all the performers into custody. Among them was dancer Georgia Southern, known as the Torrid Tantalizer. The performers were released after a warning to refrain from using the objectionable material in the remaining performances. After Saturday, of course, the Troc will be closed permanently. The Troc did not close permanently, of course, and it was to survive numerous other attempts at comstockery by such noted guardians of public morals as the Reverend Mary Hubbard, Joan of Arc, Ellis, pastor of the old Primitive Methodist Church on Woodland Avenue, who headed an organization known as the Youth Protection Committee. She not only was an archenemy of the Troc, but she fought desperately to prevent the Philadelphia Museum of Art from accepting what is now one of its best-known displays, the striking St. Gaudens statue, Diana, Goddess of the Hunt. Ms. Ellis contended that inasmuch as Diana was buff naked, the statue was an evil influence on all who looked upon it. Another hyperactive censor, who was forever rocking the Troc's management dreamboat, was the Reverend E.A.L. Palmquist, executive chairman of a committee sponsored by the Philadelphia Federation of Churches. Once, testifying as to the quality of a Troc show, he said, "It was so shocking that I am ashamed to confess that I stayed through a good part of what they called a presentation, that to my mind is very bad for the morals of Philadelphia. The show was obscenity itself. The jokes were suggestive, putrid, and rotten, accentuated by the entire cast with a succession of immoral gestures." I have to believe that before summoning the gendarmes, Mr. Palmquist waited for Carrie Fennell or Ann Corio or Jeannie Carroll or whoever else the headliner may have been to finish her act. He always impressed me as a man who loved his job. What went on at the Troc during what I deem its golden era was pretty genteel stuff by comparison with the sleaze that is on sale today in the peep shows, the porn movie houses, and the quadruple X bookstores throughout the city. What happened at the Troc was raucous, gaudy, and frequently vulgar, but rarely obscene. The theater itself had an astonishing amount of class, with its curved balconies and Victorian stencil drawings on the ceiling, its mirror-lined orchestra pit, and its 490 seats, all providing a good view of the stage. The place was clean then, really clean. Decay was still several decades away. There was a structure to the shows, and in their own way, they had style. After all, when you feature headliners like Corio, Hindu Wasow, Fennell, Southern, Margie Hart, and others now revered in the hagiography of stripping, that is style. It is style, too, to present such comics as Red Skelton, Abbott and Costello, Joey Fay, and Phil Silvers. And then there was that perennial Philadelphia favorite, Billy Cheese and Crackers Hagen, who twice worked 26 straight weeks at the Troc. Joey Fay was the finest burlesque comic I ever saw. The man had creativity. He originated burlesque's famous Flugel Street routine, which would have been regarded as a classic in any other branch of the theater. He could ad-lib wondrously, and he could do literally hundreds of routines from memory without any brushing up. Philadelphia was always a good burlesque town, Fay, now living in semi-retirement in New York, told me, and the Troc was always a good house. I worked the others, the Bijou, the Gaiety, and the Schubert. Remember when Ann Corio and I did glorified burlesque in the Schubert in the season of 37-38? But the Troc was my favorite. It was an intimate house. The structure of a show was almost always the same. After the overture, the first stripper would come on, followed by a comic sketch. Then would come the second stripper, another comedy routine, and a straight vaudeville act, usually a juggler, plus perhaps a singer. After intermission, the third stripper would appear, followed by a long comic sketch, then the featured stripper, and the grand finale, the pit band, directed by a bald-headed fiddler we all knew simply as Merrick, and consisting also of piano, clarinet, saxophone, bass fiddle, and drums, would perform manfully, and the dancing chorus, 10 Shirley Page at the Lovelies, 10, would strive to maintain some semblance of precision. Bright in memory, however, is one long-stemmed chorine, who simply could not keep tempo, invariably moved left while the rest of the line was moving right. The Troc featured what was advertised as, quote, traveling burlesque. Philadelphia was part of a circuit that started in Union City, New Jersey, the main base for burlesque after Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia banned it in New York in 1937, and took in 17 cities from Boston and Rochester to Allentown and Baltimore. Except for the chorus line, the orchestra, and one resident stripper, new faces appeared at the Troc week after week. In the 1930s, and this was in the depths of the Depression, remember, a headliner stripper could make as much as $750 a week, while a top-flight comic could command about $350. Second bananas didn't do nearly as well, of course, nor did straight men. But if a man was good at what he did, he was rarely out of work. Occasionally, there were more or less accomplished comedians in comedy routines. For the most part, female roles were played by the lesser strippers on the bill. Never would a headliner such as Carrie Fennell play in a comedy routine. She did only her own thing, and in Carrie's case, her thing is difficult to explain. Carrie was an abundantly endowed woman who worked with tassels. What she did was arouse these tassels, which were on her breasts, to unbelievable revolutions in opposite directions as the drum rolled and the saxophone wailed. At one midnight show in early 1938, a car full of us used to drive into Philadelphia from Westchester every Sunday night to go to the Troc. There appeared a stripper who looked like a good bet to give Fennell a run for the title of Chescapades Girl. The young woman's name was Pearl Miley, and she was a Philadelphian, according to the Master of Ceremonies. Miss Miley was generally better proportioned than Fennell, and she had what variety was to term an, quote, adequate memory St. Vitus condition. She looked good, very good, that midnight, but it proved a flash in the pan. Before the next season opened, she had dropped from sight. There were stories that she had fallen in love with a Fuller brush salesman and had given up her career for him. Georgia Southern, she of the flaming red hair, was the hardest working girl of all the headliners. She was called the poor man's Garbo, and when she did a bump, she bumped. "Here's one for you boys in the balcony," she would cry, and ba-boom! Not only that, but she used to worry the stage manager at the Troc because she all but tore down the curtain show after show with the violence of her grinds. The comics, even the top bananas, doing the best of their routines, were as subtle as a blunt instrument. Paradoxically, they were funny. It was, I suspect, a case of being so dreadful that it was wonderful. Have a few samples. "Hey, boss, what's the best way to build a house? From the bottom up or from the top down?" "Why, you idiot. Everybody knows that you have to build a house from the bottom up." "Yeah? Hey, fellas, tear it down. We got to start all over." Or, "I'm sorry, madam. That tooth is so badly infected that it'll have to come out." "Oh, doctor, I'd sooner have a baby." "Look, madam, before I tilt the chair, make up your mind." Or, "Doctor, there's a patient here to see you." "What's his name?" "I don't know. He's a midget." "In that case, I'll see him shortly." It just may be that the greatest entertainment of all came during the intermission when the candy butcher delivered his spiel. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight the Troc Theatre is absolutely privileged to make yez this special offer of a genuine Nestle's chocolate bar that regularly sells for $1. Well, we are offering it tonight for $1, but we are giving two rare and unusual premiums with it. The first, which I am holding here in my right hand, is this miniature telescope, which you hold up to the light to see a sight that will amaze you. It is a very spicy item, ladies and gentlemen. Need I say more? No? Well, then on to the second premium. I have in this little book here, published in gay Paris and chock full of photographs that I guarantee are the most daring you have ever seen. Now, who will be the first to take advantage of this special offer? With that, he and 3 or 4 other salesmen began moving through the house. Here and there, dummies or shills had been planted in the audience to make fake purchases, and they were about the only ones to so much as beckon to a salesman. After a few minutes, the chief butcher, hurrying back to the front of the theater, cried, "Stop the sale! Stop the sale!" Then, taking a deep breath, he would begin phase 2. "Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I moved among yous in the theater, I seen you a skeptic. I give you my word, this is the offer of a lifetime. This little telescope, when you hold it up to the light, well, I can't describe what you'll see, but most of yous is married, so yous know what I'm talking about. As for the photographs..." And so it went. Another bet by the candy butcher involved the promise that each and every box of Cracker Jack contains a spicy little bonus. Almost invariably, it turned out to be a slip of paper on which was printed a traveling salesman joke of ancient vintage. On what were described as appreciation nights for all you wonderful patrons of the Troc, there were assurances that inside the wrappers of at least 20 candy bars about to go on sale, there were $20 bills. And there were. At least they looked like $20 bills. But I doubt that any ever left the theater. The dummies short-stopped them as planned. The live music is long gone from the Troc. The candy butcher has departed. Burlesque is long since dead. And the porn movies and the untalented girls are there now. And soon this mutant will be dispatched mercifully. Finis will be written to an era. Oh, Mickey Dennis, why didn't you ever answer my letter? And that's our episode. Thank you, Edgar Williams, for your lovely piece in the Inquirer back in March of 1978. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the podcast, and thank you so much for your support on Patreon of all the work that we do. I'll be back again next month with another episode taken from the vault of Patreon, and in this one, we go to a different type of Philadelphia entertainment, the opera. Thanks. Catch you later. Bye-bye.